A few announcements before we get started. Number 1. I am announcing the winner of the fan art contest. Number 12. Bow Down Witches by Pink Spooky. Congratulations. Picking a winner was beyond difficult, but I would like to thank everyone for submitting art. I loved them all. I hope to do this again next year too. The second announcement is that my very first audiobook that I narrated and produced was released today. I am so happy and I just had to share it with you all. I'll leave a link in case anyone wants to check it out. And without further ado, let's get into the video. Many people think that ghosts simply aren't real, and that any paranormal activity can be scientifically explained away. In some cases, they are correct, but in many others, they are not. Whether you are a believer or not, the people in these stories share with you their first-person experiences they have had with ghosts that might make you skeptics out there a believer too. Enjoy. I am an intensive care nurse, and I have many stories, but the one that haunts me is the time I think I saw the actual Grim Reaper. It was 1999. It was late in the day, summer, and turning dark. I was in charge of this 12-bed ICU unit in London. I was at the nurses' station and looked up to see this man opening and coming through the double doors into the unit. What was so striking about him were his clothes. He looked like he had been picked straight out of 1974 and dropped into 1999. He was wearing brown cord flares, the platform shoes men wore then, an orange, yellow, and brown check shirt with a cream and brown patterned tank top over the shirt. He was white, with shortish brown hair, and about 30 years old. He walked calmly, like he did this all the time, toward a bay of patients. Not recognizing him, and knowing he wasn't a relative of other healthcare personnel, I said, "Hello, can I help you?" He looked at me directly, nodded as if to say hello, and carried on walking. I watched him, and he stopped at the end of a patient's bed and turned to look at them. He never touched the person or do anything other than look at them. This unwell but stable patient suddenly and unexpectedly deteriorated. As the staff went to assist, they all acted like they didn't see him. He turned around, and as calmly as he came, he left. I never saw what direction he went as I left the station to go and help. Ultimately, despite our best efforts, the patient passed away. I spoke to other staff about him, and no one else had saw him. But 17 years later, it is still vivid in my mind. My family bought a penthouse apartment when I was in high school. We got it for $50,000 under what it was worth. Turned out, the previous owner was a music producer who had disappeared. The guy's body finally wound up being found months later. The way I remember it, he had been tortured, then shot multiple times. Extremely sad. We bought the apartment from his mother, who just wanted to be done with the whole thing. My stepdad and I started going daily to fix it up, but I always felt uneasy about being there, like someone was watching me. One day, my stepdad went down to the car to get some tools and left me alone. As I was there by myself, I looked down the hallway that led down to the master bedroom, and I shit you not, I saw a bright white silhouette appear from one side of the master bedroom walking to the next. It stopped in the middle, turned, and looked at me. I fucking froze. It wasn't like an evil kind of thing. He just looked at me for a few seconds and then walked to the other side and disappeared. I freaked the fuck out and bolted for the elevator. This shit happened during the middle of the day. It was as bright as could be, so I knew what the fuck I saw. But my stepdad didn't believe me and laughed it off. A couple of days later, while we were tearing down some built-in shelves in one of the bedroom closets, we found a notebook belonging to the previous owner, and in it were love poems, lyrics, and sketches. My mom told my stepdad not to throw it away so we could give it to the guy's mom. My stepdad, being a piece of shit, threw it away. After that, creepy shit started happening. Lights turned on and off. Windows we had closed the previous day would now be open. These were hurricane force windows, by the way, the kind that have latches and keys to them, so it was impossible for the wind to have opened them. My mom and I stopped helping with renovations after that, and my stepdad hired some guys he knew to come and finish. These guys lived pretty far away, so my stepdad told them to stay in the apartment while the repairs were done. They lasted 2 days. They called my stepdad in a panic in the middle of the night saying they had heard shit, saw shadows, and that their alarm clock would go off at random times they hadn't set it to. My mom decided that that was it and called in a priest to bless the house. We then burnt sage all throughout for a couple of days with the windows open to cleanse and clear the apartment. The creepy things stopped after that. A few years later, I ran into one of the guys and asked him what had happened in that apartment that spooked him, and he said the doors were slamming in the middle of the night, and they heard what sounded like things moving out into the laundry area. He said it was the scariest shit he'd ever been a part of, and wanted nothing else to do with it. I was around 12, and my cousin, my brother, and I were all hanging out in our family room watching movies. It was midnight, and my mom had been in bed for a few hours. I looked up and saw at least what I thought was my mom walk past the entryway to the family room from the living room to the kitchen. My brother even called out, "Hey, Mom!" No response. She just walked right past without acknowledging us and into the kitchen and out of view. She was wearing a long, flowing whitish nightgown. Keep in mind, the entire house is pitch black except for the light from the TV. A couple of seconds later, we were wondering what was going on, so we got up and glanced in the kitchen. Nothing, just darkness. We started freaking out, and all three ran down the hallway, through the living room, and burst into her room. She was lying in bed, fast asleep. We woke her up and asked her if she was just in the kitchen. She leaned up to figure out what was going on. She was wearing blue pajamas, not wearing a white nightgown. This freaked us out more. I didn't know what to really think. There's a door that connects the kitchen to her room, but that door was always wedged shut and would make a loud creaking, scraping noise once it was shoved open. No one used that door. We were up and heading toward her room in a matter of seconds. She wouldn't have had time to walk past, shove open and close that door, and change her clothes. We had no idea who or what we saw walk past that kitchen that night. I would have convinced myself I was seeing things, but my brother called her name. He saw it too. It's been over 10 years. I'm 24 now, and the thought still gives me goosebumps, and for some reason, I start to tear up when I think too much about it. I'm a rational person, but if you ask me if I believe in ghosts, I cannot comfortably say no. In 2009, a friend of mine was coming home from being out of town at 11 p.m. with his father. And 2 to 3 kilometers before entering the city, they suddenly saw a white horse standing in the middle of the road. He tried to save the horse and swerved the car into the ditch below the road. As they got out of the car, there was no horse to be seen anywhere. He told me this the next day and we both found it creepy. Fast forward to 2015. Other friends of mine were coming home from a different city at 1:30 a.m. and doing 140 kilometers an hour. They reached the same place near the city border and suddenly seen the same white horse standing in the middle of the road. Driver weighed in his options and decided it was just best to try not to turn. He hit his brakes, and the car just went straight through the horse, skidding. They came to a stop and realized it was a ghost horse or something and ran home. He told me about this the next day. Weird thing is, neither of these friends ever met each other, and there were 6 years difference between both occurrences. My kid's Catholic school is over 100 years old. There's a basement under the gym that's used for storage. I was subbing once, and during recess, one of the kickballs went down the stairs. A little girl was standing at the top of the stairs yelling, "Just throw it up to me." I went over and asked who she was talking to, and she replied, "That big man down the stairs." I went down there, and nobody was there, and it was the only way in. I asked some of the other kids if they had seen the man before, and they said yes, but Sister told us not to talk to him. I asked them to describe Sister, and they described a nun who hadn't been a nun there in 40 years. One of my close friends lived next to a house that was always vacant. It would sell, people would move in, and then one day they'd be gone and the house would be up for sale again. One summer, when the house was listed again and the last family had moved out, we decided to take a tour. We thought it would be cool to play chicken with whatever was haunting this house. My friend was really skinny and crawled through the dog door that led straight into the kitchen, then opened the back door for me. We went through all of the rooms and it was pretty nondescript. Just a typical 50s style bungalow house with a similar layout to his home. Lots of pretty woodwork and built-ins. After we determined that the house wasn't really that creepy after all, we sat down in the dining area, on the floor, across from a little horseshoe-shaped nook with a kitchen table and a built-in bench. It was dusk out, but the windows didn't have curtains, and it never got that dark in our city anyway. At this point, we had been in the house for maybe 25 minutes, and after we finished eating our food, we stayed sitting just to hang out and talk since we weren't spooked out at all. All of a sudden, completely out of nowhere, my vision went black, and I felt this eerie coldness wash all over me. A feeling so thick, I felt like it penetrated through my body down to my bones. At the very same moment this happened, my friend screamed. I virtually could not see anything and was groping around trying to find something to grab onto. I felt so unsettled and cold. There's really no other word for it. After what felt like hours, I felt my friend's hand in mine, and he pulled me to my feet and dragged me through the house to the back door. He kept pulling on my arm and I still couldn't see anything. We got outside and slowly, a body shiver ran down my spine. As soon as I was outside, a whole body shiver that started at the tip of my toes and went all the way up to my scalp. Unexpectedly and suddenly I could see again. My friend was as pale as a sheet and looked absolutely terrified. I felt off and sort of gross, I guess is the best word, and in shock. I told him that I couldn't see at all until I was outside, that it felt like I had been enveloped in blackness. He was just staring at me and I finally asked him why he had screamed. He hugged me and told me that he pulled me out of the house as soon as I started reaching around like I was blind, because a little girl who was completely black yet see-through crawled out from under the table we were across from and sat on top of me. I was at a friend's house when I passed out on the couch. Woke up a bit later and realized it was time for me to go. Got up, noticed my buddy's light on in his room, but the door was shut. Walked by the door and told him I was leaving because I had to work in the morning. He said, "Yup, see ya." I went to the fridge to grab my drink, walked back by his room, and said, "Later, dude." He said, "Yup." Something didn't seem legit. Didn't sound quite like him, so I opened the door. No one was there. No one was even in the fucking house. I went outside and his truck was gone. I freaked the fuck out. Called his cell, and he had left to go to McDonald's 15 minutes prior. I bolted outside and waited for him to get home. He told me that the kid that used to live there years ago hung himself in the attic, and ever since he lived there, he has noticed strange things and voices. This was confirmed by the neighbor. After that, just about anyone who goes over there has a weird experience. My buddy has dealt with it for years. When it gets weird, he yells out, "Leave me alone." And he says the weird vibes stop for a bit, but they always come back. One of his ex-girlfriends swears that one night when she was taking a bath in the house, and she had the radio on, she closed her eyes and all of a sudden, the radio slowly turned down. She didn't think much of it until it turned back up on its own. It went down again. She turned it back up louder, closed her eyes once more, and said that someone whispered right into her eye, "Turn it down." She opened her eyes and saw a man standing there with black messy hair and glasses. My friend asked his neighbor if that description was anyone he knew. He went into his living room and brought back a picture of the boy. I'm told by the ex-girlfriend that it was the same person without a doubt. The children in my family have a thing with seeing ghosts. We have had 3 major incidents that freaked out my family from all different generations. The first incident was when my sister was just able to talk. My mom was driving past Peterson Tractor, where my grandpa used to work, and my sister pointed the business and said Grandpa plays with tractors. The strange thing was that my grandpa died when my mom was 15, and my mother had yet to mention him to my sister. The next part happened almost every night when I was little. My mom would put me down for bed, and I would immediately jump out of bed and go over to my grandma's vanity set she gave me before she died. I would say goodnight to whatever was over there and give it a hug. I would blow a kiss and say, "Good night, Grandma." My poor mom now had both of her children seeing ghosts. The third story was the strangest. My aunt died of leukemia when she was 13, and then my cousin got diagnosed when she was 10. My cousin was laying in her hospital bed when she turned to my grandma and asked, "Who is that little girl in a white wicker chair?" My grandma had her describe the little girl, and my grandma showed her a picture of my aunt who had passed away, and she confirmed that it was her. My family and I were traveling from western Kentucky to Florida for vacation. After a long day of driving, we ate waffles and other breakfast miscellaneous food at one of those all-night breakfast places and were looking for somewhere to sleep for the night, but everywhere was full. When we finally saw a hotel lacking a lit-up no vacancy sign, it was a Days Inn in Dothan, Alabama. I needed to stretch my legs, and my game gear had died, so I went into the front office with my dad to get the room. the woman, tired and barely contained by her hotel employee's uniform, told us, "We're all booked up." Her coworker said, "What about 229? And she paused for a second, looked at me, then at my dad and said, "Well, yeah, I guess you could take 229. Would you like 229? "Well, yeah, why not? Sure." And so began the strangest night I've ever experienced. We settled in for bed almost instantly. My brother and I in one, my parents in the other. Something seemed off about the room, but we were too tired to care. At around 2:30 in the morning, I woke up to my mother screaming and my dad sitting straight up in bed. "There's a man in the room. Hey, who are you? What are you doing in here?" We all woke up, and there was a dark figure of a large man in the room standing over my parents' bed. My brother dove for the light switch, and the room came in a sudden, quiet focus. I remember thinking later about what might be a more appropriate or effective thing to say when you're encountered by a large, dark figure standing at the foot of your bed. But in the moment, nothing was there. Just a shitty TV, a mini fridge, and a mirror. We all sat there for a moment trying to figure out what had just happened. My dad said, "Oh, we're leaving." And we were back on the road as fast as we fell asleep. Later on, my parents discussed it. My mother apparently only saw a man. My father saw a man and a dog. I just remember seeing shapes. We scoured the internet to see if anything weird had happened in the hotel. I even tried calling the hotel years later, but it had since gone under new management. From time to time, we always wonder what had happened in that room. I'm a detentions deputy that works alone in a 60-bed jail on graveyard shift. Several times I've seen inmates out of their cells in the middle of the night, went to investigate, and found everyone accounted for and asleep. We've had 2 suicides and 1 homicide since I've worked there, and it would always happen within the month of the incident. They're usually out of the corner of my eye, or when I walk by a door, and I've never gotten a good look at them, other than noticing the flash of an orange jumpsuit. Our SEG inmates and the 2 suicides wore orange jumpsuits. Then they're gone. I've seen an inmate up against the glass in the gym, then walk away from it, and when I get there, he's gone. I've seen one on several times standing in an empty SEG cell as I walk by. I saw one in our kitchen standing at the sink in the dark as I walked by the door. I've also found lights on in the middle of the night in rooms that I don't have access to, and property bins pulled off their shelves when nobody was there. What about you? Have you noticed something out of the corner of your eye, or felt someone staring at you when you're all alone? Are you a believer yet? If not, stay tuned, because October is just getting started. If you have a story you would like to see featured here, please email me at DuchessDark676@gmail.com. See you next time.